by the name of Jason. Jason was like no other kid that I had ever met in my youth ministry. I was a firm believer. I was the kid at Bible college that went to all of the mission services. We had Friday night services where they always had a missionary in. We lived in Springfield, Missouri. So I got to see and hear all of the great missionaries of the past from the Assemblies of God who came through there and preached in these services. And nearly every Friday night I was there. Every Friday night I was like, okay, God, where do you want me to go? I will go wherever you call me. I got to tell you that all through Bible college, I never looked at a map and had that moment of, go to China. I never had that moment, okay? So I was always disappointed in that. And I felt God had been calling me to go and become a youth pastor. And I got to tell you, there was a little bit of disappointment in that because it was like, okay, I will do that, and that's the doors that God opened. But God, if you want to call me to missions, I'll go. But I never felt that calling. I was in a church in Iowa being youth pastor when our district youth director at the time, we were just having conversation, and I was sharing that with him, that, someday maybe I'll get to go to the mission field. That I truly believe there's no greater calling in all of the world. All 4 of our kids, when they were infants, we gave them to missions. Okay, whether they do that with their life or not, we don't know. That's up to God. But we gave them to missions, believing that there's no greater calling, anything in the world they could do, nothing is greater than going and preaching the gospel somewhere in this world. So I'm talking with him, and I'm telling him a little bit of my frustration, and he says, well, if God hasn't called you to go, what are you doing about sending? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, if he's not calling you to go, then you are a sender. And I'm telling you, that conversation changed my ministry. From that day forward, my youth group became all about missions. When I was a children's pastor, it was about missions, equipping and teaching kids about missions. So into that setting at the Macomb Church walks this young man by the name of Jason. And I began to share about missions and raising money for our project with Speed the Light, with the Assemblies of God teenagers. Just like there's a program for kids, there's a program for teenagers. And the teenagers of our state buy vehicles. We are one of the few denominations that when a missionary goes to the field, we say, here is a car. Here's whatever, or a bicycle. Or whatever they need, we provide it. We've bought mules, we've bought camels, we've bought airplanes. We've bought them all. We've bought little boats. Whatever it takes to get someone from here to there, the teenagers of our denomination have taken great care in providing also millions and millions of dollars through the years for those needs. So we were raising money for Speed the Light. And Jason was a 13-year-old who began to say, I can show up and help. Now, we did lots of work projects. All year long, we did work projects. And we raised money for camp, we raised money for convention, and we raised money for missions. Those 3 things were always going all the time. Every kid in our youth group had a name and an account. And so in January, if they gave, they could give it to camp, they could give it to convention, or they could give it to missions. So they could work for their way to camp, they could work for their way to convention, and they could give to missions. Jason was one of those kids. I don't remember him going to camp. That really wasn't his thing. I think he went to convention maybe once or twice. Really wasn't his thing. But let me tell you what was his thing. Missions. And Jason would go with me. It didn't matter what the day was. When kids would start showing up, hey, we're going to go clean a garage. Hey, we're going to go rake leaves. We're going to go work in the yard. We're going to go clean gutters. We're going to, whatever the job was, Jason was there. Always. If it was raining and nobody showed up, Jason showed up. I remember one day raking leaves, and there were so many leaves. It was cold, and it was starting to like drizzle, and the wind was blowing 60 miles an hour. And I said to Jason, let's go. And because he showed up. And he said, are we really going to rake leaves in this wind? I said, yes, because all we have to do is get them about an inch off the ground. We'll never see them again. That yard was clean in no time. I remember one time somebody wanted leaves picked up. We didn't get to them. We had so many jobs that we went and we moved snow so we could get to leaves. And Jason was the kid that was there. One of the things we did as a youth group and within our church is we collected pop cans to recycle. Back then, aluminum was worth a little more than it is now. I don't know if it'd be worth doing it now to the same degree. But I made a big box, took a big furniture box, and I made it look just like a Coke machine. Sat in our church, and you could just throw bags, one can at a time, whatever, into that box. And we would empty it out, recycle it, and all of that money went to missions. Well, Jason got the idea that we could go out and we could walk alongside the roads and we could find pop cans. So we did that. But he also had the idea that we could find dumpsters. And we could go into dumpsters and find pop cans. Now, if you know anything about me and the gag mechanism that I have, it's about from this distance that I begin to get, in fact, just even telling you makes my throat seize up. In fact, I'm going to have to loosen my tie just to even tell the story. Hey, Ron, thank you. Ron provided this from Waste Management, brand new. It's just wonderful. Thank you. I did load it up with trash, though, I'm just telling you. So, but Jason, we got the idea that we could go and we could go to the dumpsters and could look for cans. But, you know, finding a can here sitting on top was generally not how it worked. Sometimes they were beer cans, and that was even worse for me. Just the smell would make me throw up. And so Jason would take it upon himself. He did not have the same mechanism that I had. And he would take it upon himself to, well, if I can, he would, hold on a second. He would take it upon him. I couldn't do it. I just could not. And if I did do it, I was throwing up, picking up cans, throwing up, picking up cans. And that just didn't work out very good. Whoop, 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 whoop. Okay, that didn't go like planned. Oh, got a cramp in my leg. You ever had that happen? Wow. Oh, hey, I need my coat. John, can you give me that? Today, we're going to talk about being desperate. I don't need the coat on. I need what's in the coat. Money. All right, thank you. All right. You know, people might say to Jason, and kids made fun of him. No doubt about it. Other kids would go by, see what we were doing. We got called names. I won't go into some of those stories. But you would say, well, yes, there really is trash in here. You would say, is it worth it? You know, the 3 years that I was Jason's youth pastor, Jason raised literally thousands and thousands of dollars. Not hundreds, not 10 here, not 5 here. He did it by raising 5 here and 10 here and 20 here. You know, the cool thing about Jason, he never took any of it for himself. Not one time. Everything that he did, he gave it 100% to missions. I never met a kid like that. We had lots of other kids that had a heart for missions like that, but I never had anybody so consistently for 3 years show up every time, willing to work, just didn't have his hand out looking for a freebie. He was always willing to work for that money. You know, say, well, was it worth it? Well, here's the reality. We'll never know this side of eternity. But I truly believe that someday in eternity, that there will be people from all around this world who will walk up to Jason Magruder, who's with our preschool kids right now, and they will say thank you. Because of that gift that you gave, I responded to the gospel. His willingness to do even the worst job of jumping into a dumpster to collect a few cans for missions will not go unrewarded. And it makes me think. Now, I was never desperate enough to jump into the dumpster. Not one time was I in the dumpster. They didn't make them clean enough, new enough. I never caught one in this state before. They all had an odor that I'm 4 steps away and I'm already not feeling it. But you know, it's made me think. And I brought some money here today. Because I wonder if I took this dollar bill, and just so you know, none of these are real. I printed them fresh in my basement just last night. So, anybody want to go to lunch? But what if I took this dollar bill and I put it in a baggie? And I went to the McDonald's trash, because I can't imagine a worse dumpster than McDonald's. In fact, when I was youth pastor, Stephanie Puccini, some of you will know her. She was Stephanie Gray back then. She was a 13-year-old kid that left her retainer on her tray and threw it away at McDonald's. And an hour later, I was back digging through bags of garbage, puking until we found it. She still owes me. So I know how nasty McDonald's garbage is. Absolutely gross. Food, drinks, condiments. Nasty. But what if I took this dollar bill, and a brand new, fresh dollar bill, put it inside of a baggie so that when you got it, it would be fresh, and I hid it in that garbage? How many would say, yes, I would jump into that dumpster to get a dollar bill? 3, 4 teenagers. After church, see me, I'll give you $1. So most of us wouldn't do it for $1. But what if I put a $100 bill in that dumpster? Oh, I got a few adults' hands now. You would go dumpster diving in the ketchup. You know what ketchup is like in that thing? There's no way you're not getting it on your clothes. $100 may not even pay to buy new clothes when you're done. But there were a few more. Now we have some adults in the game who would say, for a $100 bill, I'm in. But I wonder, what if I put this $1,000 bill into the dumpster? Oh, a few more hands. Dave Ungashik says, I'm in, baby. It'll replace my clothes. Little left over to spend on a truck, you know. So we have a few more. Any more takers? How many say $1,000? I'd dive in a nasty McDonald's. All right, some of you, you know where I'm going, so you're holding out. I don't even know if these are real. But, well, I know they're not real, but do they make a $10,000 bill? They don't print them. Okay? This is a real person on the bill. Okay? I have no idea what his name is because it's a bad copy. But what if there was a $10,000 bill? Is there anybody here that would dumpster dive one time into a McDonald's dumpster for $10,000? Oh! We're in! We're in. Zeb's all over this. I was willing to do it for $1. 10,000. Well, I'm sure that these aren't real or that they don't print them, but Woodrow Wilson is actually on the $100,000 bill. It's in a baggie. It's going to be sealed up. It's going to be fresh from the mayonnaise, the mustard, that's the one that kills me, the ketchup all mixed up, the shake. You know how nasty that kind of stuff is? I mean, you can dig. Yeah, you can find fries. You know that McDonald's fries turns to lard in less than 60 seconds? Oh, no. That's gross. Oh, but for $100,000, how many would dive and go find that $100,000 bill? Some of you have held out for the big one. The Statue of Liberty. You can get kangaroos, you can get Santa Claus, they're all on there. Okay? But what if there was $1 million bill? In a baggie. You're digging through all the garbage. You don't care that you're going to come across that sandwich that the kid didn't eat all of it. It's not going to bother you. It's not going to bother you at all. But for $1 million, that's my meal from last night. Okay? Do you really think I could dig through trash and get a burger? Not a chance. Now, for that $1 million, let's just add that they not only have their trash from the dining room, but there's also the bathroom trash. The dirty diapers that moms throw in there that didn't quite get sealed up. And it reeks. You know it's there before you get there. But for $1 million, would you be willing to go get? Most of you in this room, okay? I don't know what my breaking point. I'm going to guess I would endure whatever, probably for the $100. I'd be in at $100 probably. I would look at it as an opportunity to have $100 for missions that I didn't have before. But how high would you have to go before you're willing to jump in and dig through piles of nastiness to find some money? See, and what is it that keeps us from diving in for a lesser amount? Because even as we went across the room, we were all at different levels. Some of you weren't in till the $1 million. That one had your attention. But the majority jumped even from 1,000 to 10,000. Boom, there's a big jump of hands. From 10,000 to 100,000, we were almost all in at that point. See, what keeps us? I want to talk for just a minute on why we wouldn't jump in. What is it that keeps us from jumping into a dumpster to get something? The first thing would be is that it's gross. There's a gross factor connected to this thing. Now this one's brand new, straight from the factory, and thank you, thank you, thank you. There is no, I didn't have to Febreze this. Oh, hopefully I won't have to be Febrezed. But it's just gross. It's a dumpster. It's supposed to be gross. It smells. The stuff in it is gross. Another reason that we wouldn't go in is a pride factor. What if somebody saw me? How many would dive in, but before you do it, you'd have to say, Hey, go stand and watch for me because I don't want anybody seeing me digging into dump. How many would say, I don't want anybody seeing me doing it? Yeah, even in a buck, here's somebody now saying, yeah, I don't want to be seen doing it. I'll go do it if no one's around. But there's a pride factor that would keep some people from diving into the, oh, no. I'm way too dignified for that. Now, that may change when it gets to $100,000 and we all of a sudden say, forget that, $100,000, I don't care who sees me. But at a buck, we're saying, I'm not just not going, no. I'm not just not going into that. Well, there's also another factor, and that's the lack of need. You know, a lot of us would say, well, I don't need $1. I'm not diving in for $1. I can reach in my pocket and pull out more than that right now. I don't need $1. Some would say, I'm not going in for 100 because I don't need 100. It'd be nice if somebody gave me 100, but I'm not working for the 100. I'm not going to dive into that dumpster for $100. No, I just don't need the money that bad, we might say. So what causes us to toss aside all of these factors? What gets us to toss aside the grossness, the pride? What gets us to toss aside the lack of need? And it comes down to this being the answer. When the gain is higher than the loss. When there is more value in what you're receiving than what you're losing. If it's $100 and I say $100 is worth getting gross, $1,000 worth getting gross, I'll throw those clothes away, never wear them again, I'll take a hot shower, done, $1,000. See, there's a place when what we receive is greater to us than what we are losing in grossness and pride and even lack of need. And we all have a different place on that scale because we're all different. I'm telling you, I know people who would say, not for $1 million would I dive in a dumpster. I just wouldn't do it. Though I think a lot of people would think about it. Ruth Grossman, would you jump in there for $1 million? I'm with you, girl! Okay, I changed that back. If Ruth's jumping in, we're all jumping in. I'm going to boost her up. Give her a lift. See, the increase in potential gain increases our level of desperation. It increases our willingness to put aside, ooh, that's gross, or, okay, who may be looking? I don't want anybody to see me, or, I really don't need that money that bad. If we become desperate, see, we live in America where most of us aren't going to a trash can for lunch today. Most of us are going to go home and we're going to have a nice meal, or we're going to go to a restaurant and we're going to let somebody else have prepared a meal for us. And we're going to all eat pretty good today. But yet we know that there are kids and people all across America and around this world, especially around this world, who will be desperate enough to jump into a garbage can for a meal. And when we talk about being desperate, you know, the definition of desperate means reckless or dangerous because of despair or urgency. When somebody's hungry, it's because of despair. When they're starving, it might even become urgency. As we talk about missions, I want us to focus on the urgency part. There's an urgency to what we do. See, when we perceive something as being urgent or a need or a desire, we can act recklessly to attain it. Someone who is eating out of a dumpster for their next meal has become reckless. Would that be normal? Would we say that is normal behavior? Go eat somebody else's table scraps? That wouldn't be normal. Go fight the rats for food? But yet some people have become so desperate for their next meal that they're willing to do that very thing. We come up with the slogan that says, desperate people take desperate measures. And it's true. Today, I want to bring this together with a couple questions that I believe that the Lord is asking us. Each one of us. The first question is, do we understand how desperate our world is without Christ? Do we really understand how desperate people are? Do we understand that if people do not hear about Christ, that they will die and be separated from Christ forever? And that their eternal destination, according to the book of Revelation, is that one day they will be cast into the lake of fire with Satan and the demons? That is their future. How blessed are you that you have heard about Christ? And yet, with all of the people who are desperate for God, some of them don't even know it, never heard the gospel even one time. Yet we live in a country where there's a church on nearly every corner, and we hear it, and we hear it, and we hear it, and we hear it, and still many refuse. It's one thing to refuse. It's another thing to have never been given a clear opportunity. And yet, with trillions of people not followers of Christ, there is only a handful of Christians carrying out the Great Commission. Only a handful. See, it's not the responsibility of a few. It is the responsibility of the church of Christ, the body of Christ. And that is not a denominational thing. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you have a responsibility to carry out the Great Commission. Plain and simple. It is all of our responsibility. All of us. Jesus told us the harvest is ripe, but the workers are few. The fields are ripe for harvest, but the workers are few. We all need to be aware of how desperate people are, that there is a real hell. And people are going there. And it's not going to be a party place where they can party with their friends, dude. How many times have we heard that? Satan has done well at making hell sound like fun. Because the way people talk about it, it is not a place to fear or dread. Man, I'm going to be there, I'm going to listen to my music, I'm going to crank it up, and we're going to party, dude! That is not a biblical perspective of hell. And if we as believers know what Scripture teaches about hell and how real it is, then are we desperate to reach people? And that brings us to our second question. As a believer, are you desperate to reach the lost? See, it begs the question, what are we desperate for? See, for people who are worldly, let me tell you what people are desperate for in this world. There are people who are desperate for popularity, for position and prestige. They want to be popular. Starts in school. Don't we want to be in the popular group? We want people to know us, to like us. Just want to be popular. We want to have a place of position. We want to gain a certain amount of prestige so we can say, look at who I am. Look at me. Look at who I am. That's what worldly people are chasing after. They're also chasing after power. Look at what I've done. I have so many people that work for me or work under me, or I've created this and I've done this. Look at what I've done. As if we have the power to do much within ourselves. And then the one that, I don't know how you can be an American and not struggle with this, but possessions. This has truly become a religion to people in America because we worship stuff. We make stuff our idols. Say, oh, no, we don't. Check yourself out. Anything that you put over God is an idol. Anything. Your home, your cars, your family. Huh? You're supposed to love your family. Yes. But you're supposed to put God first. And yet people say, look at what I've acquired. We now judge people. We look at people of how successful they are based on what neighborhood they live in, what their house is like, what they drive, how they dress. When the true measure of people are not about the clothes that they wear. It's not about the car that they drive. But it's about who possesses them. See, as believers, we're not supposed to chase after any of those things. We're not supposed to chase after prestige, popularity, power, possessions. We don't chase after any of those things. As believers, Exodus 20 says, you shall have no other gods before me. Mike shared this last week. In Matthew, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Put God first. Jesus said, right before he left this planet, in Matthew 28, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. Go and make disciples. That is the Great Commission. That is what every single believer needs to have as part of their DNA. You know that's God's DNA. God so loved the world that he gave. It should be our DNA as well. Listen to what the Apostle John wrote. He was known as the Apostle of Love. He hits us right where we live when he says, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love for the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life are not of the Father, but are of the world. The world and its desires will pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. That should challenge every one of us to the core of our being. You know, in Israel's history, the Babylonians had come in and they've carried them off to exile. They've destroyed Jerusalem. And the Israelites are crying out for deliverance. And Psalm 79 records it when it says, they're praying, do not hold us or do not hold against us the sins of past generations. May your mercy come quickly to meet us, for we are in desperate need. Help us, God our Savior, for the glory of your name. Deliver us and forgive our sins for your name's sake. You know, just like the Israelites, there is a world crying out in desperation. There's a world that's crying out who is desperate. Many of them don't even know who they're crying out to. At least the Israelites knew who to cry out to. But we live in a world where people are crying out for anything and everything, and they don't even know to cry out to God. But unless someone shares the good news of Christ with them, they will never know who to cry out for. Lost people everywhere, crying out in desperation. And are we desperate enough to do whatever it takes to reach the lost so that they can hear the gospel? Are we desperate enough to care? Are we desperate enough to share? Are we desperate enough to pray? Are we desperate enough to give? Are we desperate enough to go? Or when we look at missions and the Great Commission, do we look at it like it's a buck in a baggie, shoved somewhere into a dumpster, and say, I'm not desperate enough for that? Yep, people are dying and headed to hell, and I don't care. That's what we're saying. We would never voice that, would we? None of us in this missions convention are going to say, hey, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this because I don't care that people are going to hell. But yet I wonder, is that not what we are saying? When we say, you know what, I'm busy, I don't want to jump in that. It's messy. I don't want to mess with that. I got my own stuff going on. I got my own deal going. Are we desperate enough to pray? Are you praying for lost souls? Not only within your friends and family in your circle, but are you praying for lost souls around this world? That even though you may never go there, that God will raise up people to go to the untouched people groups? Will you pray? Are you desperate enough to pray, knowing that without people praying, no one will go? Without people sending, no one will go. Are you desperate enough for their souls to pray? Are you desperate enough that you will go? You know, I think sometimes as preachers we think, you know what, I don't want to talk about going. You know, we're all kind of set in life. Everybody has jobs and families. But do you realize that nearly every single missionary on the field today was in the exact same place? Where they were sitting in a church service one day or doing something, and God spoke to them and said, eek, change of course. And maybe someone sitting here today, God is going to change the course of your life by saying, I want to set you apart to go. And maybe if you can't do that full time, or like me, God's never called you to do that full time, then maybe you need to go part-time. Find trips that you can go and connect with. Say, I want to go hang out with that missionary. Almost all of our missionaries will let you go hang out with them. Did you know that? They're all dying for help. You can go 10 days, 2 weeks, a month, a year. You can do whatever you want. And there are all kinds of avenues that you can pursue to do that. Is it going to cost you? Yeah. That's That's what it does. It costs them. Would there be sacrifice involved in that? Yep, there sure would be. But see, every one of us can probably do something. And I know that even as I speak, that we have some seniors and senior adults here, and those days for you are probably over. The thought of getting on a plane and going to a foreign country and working hard on their soil may not happen. But you did hear the story last week of, how old was she? 75, 76? Packed up and went to China for a year. It can happen. Are we desperate enough to say, Lord, send me? I'll go. And maybe He won't. But have you made yourself available to say, I will if you send me? Are you desperate enough to give so others can go? I want everyone to turn just for a moment and look at those plaques on the back wall. If you would do that. Those are all brand new. They're all updated. There are 58 families up there. Or actually, there's probably 55 families and 3 projects. 58 people, couples, who have answered the call to go full-time with their life. You say, what else do they do? Nothing. What they do is they have gone to the mission field. More than half of them up there are foreign missionaries. They go across the ocean. They leave family behind. They leave, I don't know any of them that own a home, not building equity in anything. They leave family and they go for 4 years at a time so that they can share the gospel with other people. And I think, you know what? God has called them to go. And He's called us to send. Just like my DYD told me 30 years ago, if you're not going, then what are you doing about sending? I have never forgotten those words. Those words have literally shaped my ministry all these years later. And where I am now as a pastor and standing before you goes back to that conversation. Because before that, I didn't have really missions in my ministry. Are we desperate enough that we can say, you know what? There's a few things in my life that I can live without so that they can go. Are you desperate enough for that you could sacrifice something? Find one thing this year to sacrifice. What if you gave up going out to eat once a week? Set that money aside to give to missions. That might add up more than you think. Or instead of sacrificing something, are you desperate enough that you might look and say, you know what, I'm going to look for a part-time job. I'm going to look for something where I can make a little extra money, and I'm going to give 100% of that to missions. It's going to be my missions job. I'm not going to keep any for myself. I'm just going to give it all to missions. Because I'm desperate for people to hear the gospel. And if I can sacrifice something, if I can pick something else up and do it to make a little extra, the gain is worth more than what I'm losing. See, what am I losing? Money? Are we desperate enough to look into our finances, to really look at our finances and say, what can I afford to give? I can tell you something I have done with missions from the get-go of our life. I don't pay missions at the end with what's left over. I make a commitment with a certain amount of our money, and when I write my tithe check, I write Robbie's tithe check, and I write a check for missions right from the get-go. You know, God has always taken care of us. Every year I try to bump that up a little bit so that more of our money is going to missions. You know what I find? I don't miss that money. God takes care of it. It's just like in tithing. When we tithe, we trust that God is going to do more with the 90% than we could have done with 100. And God's faithful every time to do that. And I believe He does the same thing, that as we take care of those missionaries, He takes care of us. We've seen that in our church building. As we come down to the end of this, the reason we're here in this building is because we have made a commitment to missions. That has been one of the guiding values that has led us through this project. Put missions first, and He'll take care of this building. We've been 6.5 years. Still haven't borrowed a dime. Still haven't paid a nickel in interest. And the facility that God has given us to use for His kingdom is incredible. What a blessing. It's because we've been faithful to missions. You know, the one thing I also like about missions giving is that we don't all have to be the same. What God lays on David Marsh's heart will be totally different than what He lays on Tom and Goldie's heart. Totally different than what He lays on Pastor John's heart. He's going to speak to all of us differently. And we're all at different places in life. We're all at different places with our finances. And some can give more and some will give less. But remember the story of Jesus in the temple, and He's watching all the Pharisees give. Oh, look at me as I give to the poor. I am so great. Look at me give this big offering. And Jesus says, hey, guys, look. Look at that little lady over there. She's like crawling in over there. No one's paying any attention to her. Watch her. Watch what she's doing. She makes her way around, no attention, no fanfare. And she finds the offering plate. She drops in 2 small coins. Jesus says, she just gave more than anybody else. Because she gave out of her need. They gave out of their abundance. And Jesus teaches us a great lesson about giving. You don't wait till you're rich to give. If you have something and you give it, He gives value to that. I love that about missions. Because it's not about everybody has to give the same amount. No. Every one of us, from the richest person in this room to the poorest person in this room, can give something. And God honors it all. That's a great picture. It's a great picture. We have been blessed with so much. The poorest people in America are still wealthier than most people in the world. You know that? People who live on welfare in America are wealthy compared to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, the average income is now anywhere between $400 to $600 a year. Our people on welfare would complain if they got $400 to $600 a year. Our people on welfare are rich compared to the wealth of this world. And to whom much is given, much is required. Let me assure you, when you invest in missions, and I truly believe that, I try to use that word all the time. I'm investing in missions. I pick up change. I don't spend change. This year I'm making a commitment not to spend a dollar bill for 2016. That when I get change back, I'm not going to spend a dollar bill. I'm just going to put that in with my change and give that to missions. That's an extra thing that I can do. Chances are I won't miss those dollar bills. But what are the things in our life that we would say, I'm desperate for other people to hear the good news, and I've been blessed with so much. What can I do? What can I do? In 2 weeks, we're going to be taking faith promises. Some of you today should have gotten, if you give to missions now, or you signed up last year to give to missions, let me put it that way. Because if you're new to our church and you give to missions, that may not be reflected. Or if you give to missions and you didn't fill anything out last year, that won't be reflected. But if you signed up to give to missions last year, you should have got a letter today with your name on it that I meant for you to have before church today. I was going to send it, and it didn't get sent out. But I asked Pam, hand them out immediately. Because we want to give you the first chance. We want to give you an opportunity to respond first. Inside of your bulletin, everybody got one. And I want everybody to take one and look at that. Look at those faces of those missionaries and pray. Because you know what I believe God does? I believe He's going to make somebody pop off the page at you. You're going to say, I can sponsor that missionary. I can pick them up. I can take care of that need. I believe God's going to do some incredible things. And my challenge for us today, that was easier than it looked, huh? You didn't think the old man was getting out. My challenge for us today is this. Are we desperate? We had missionaries, Scott and Susie Wurz-McComb, several months ago. They were here on a Sunday night, and they shared this illustration. And even as they shared it, I wrote down a whole page of notes that night. And God instantly spoke to me. Instantly spoke to me. That's going to be your theme for Missions Convention. Because I think so many times we live our lives and we look at missions and say, I do it, but it's no big deal. It is a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a big deal that you share your faith. It's a big deal that you live for Christ and people can see Christ in you. It's a big deal that we are senders if we're not goers. And every one of us can be a part of this. But how desperate are you? Desperate enough to work it into your budget? Desperate enough to do something extra, to have a little extra to give? Desperate enough to give up something so you can have something to give? Are we willing to dive in to a lost and dying world and saying, Lord, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, we want to reach people. Whatever it takes, we want to reach people here in industry. Whatever it takes, we want to reach people in the drive to industry. Whatever it takes, we want to reach people through our missionaries that are based in America. Whatever it takes, we want to reach people around the world. Whatever it takes. It's going to take us praying. It's going to take us going. And it is going to take us giving. And I stand before you today saying I have no problem asking you to give. None whatsoever. Say, you preachers are all about money. Say what you want. But I will unashamedly stand before you and as your pastor say, follow me in our efforts for missions. I believe in it. I'm doing it. I'm not asking anybody to do what I'm not doing. But I'm asking you as a church, as a family, can we become desperate to reach this world? I want to pray over you today. Father, I thank you for your word. And I believe that in this moment that your Holy Spirit is speaking to people, and I pray that the enemy would be driven out. That fear, that uncertainty, that anything that would be a hindrance to this message would be gone, and that your Spirit might speak to us